Hey, my name is Mr. Chipman. I am the biology teacher, AP biology teacher at Murray High School in Murray, Kentucky. This is Unit 7, Natural Selection, AP Biology, Comprehensive Review. We're going to go over the whole unit. So hopefully this will be helpful to you. I'm just going to kind of hit the high points. So you may be like, well, you left this off and I wish you would have talked about it. Please comment down below and I will answer those comments. I don't have anything else to do. All right, so let's talk a little bit about natural selection. I like this picture because it's kind of graphic. You got the dead giraffe laying over there. Natural selection is driven by death, right? That is the big idea, right? It's the things that don't work die, the things that do live. And we're going to talk about that, but I think it's important to understand that as a mechanism for evolution, natural selection depends on the death of those things that can't fit or that aren't fit, that can't survive. And that is an extremely important concept. I think that oftentimes gets overlooked. When I teach natural selection, I teach it as 4 principles. If you search the 4 principles of natural selection, you're going to see a lot of different stuff, frankly. And it's all saying the same thing. And so it really doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you understand the general idea behind it. There's some more dead giraffes. This one's, it was just pitiful. So, like, yeah, long time ago. This almost reminds me of one of those little storybooks that you see in like a doctor's waiting room. I don't know if that's you, but it's me. Long time ago, there were giraffes with a short and long neck. The ones with a short neck couldn't eat, so they're really, they're really hungry. So that's what you see in the background of the second picture is a really hungry giraffe. Actually, it looks like it's been dead for over a year. Or maybe not that long. I guess something would have come and eaten the giraffe. Only long-necked giraffes survived. Well, why? Well, first is variation. There's variation in the population. There's short necks and long necks. That is variation. Where does this variation come from? Sexual reproduction, mutation. It could come from lots of things, right? Overproduction. What does that mean? Well, there's going to be more giraffes than are able to be fed. Giraffe populations will continue to produce until there's a limitation put on them. That limitation will come from the outside, more than likely, in the form of disease, in the form of predation, in the form of being able to reach the leaves and eat them. Some sort of limitation is going to be put on them. There's going to be more giraffes than can survive. There's a limitation, and then so what does that create? Step 3, struggle for existence. There's going to be some giraffes that are able to eat, and there's going to be some that are really hungry and then kind of fall over and shrivel up and die in the background. And then step 4, differential reproductive success. What does that mean? The long-necked giraffes will reproduce. The short-necked giraffes will shrivel up and die in the background with the picture. And the long neck is going to be passed from one generation to the next. Big idea here is to make sure that you don't put that choice on the giraffes, meaning they woke up and thought, I just want to be a long-necked giraffe and like somehow choose to do that, right? This variation is seemingly random, and I think that is the big idea here is that short-necked giraffe did nothing other than was just not tall enough, and being tall was the thing that caused them to survive, right? 4 principles of natural selection, they are. Natural selection acts on phenotypes. It acts on necks in giraffes. It acts on color in mice, right? You have some mice here, the tan ones and the gray ones, and the hawk is going to eat the ones that it can see, obviously, and it can see the tan ones because they stand out like a sore thumb in the volcanic wasteland of wherever this is, right? And so they're going to get eaten. Natural selection is not acting on the gene that causes this. It is acting on the effect of that gene. And so that brown phenotype is going to be decreased. Is it going to be completely eliminated from the population? Depends. Probably not, right? Especially if it's like a recessive allele that will kind of be latent in the heterozygous state. But it acts on the phenotype. The black phenotype is more fit than the brown phenotype. And I keep saying this word more fitness. I could go back here and kind of talk about fitness. Fitness is 2 things. It is not only the ability to survive, but it's also the ability to reproduce. And so make sure that you understand that concept. Fitness is a good word to use on the exam because it demonstrates that you understand survival. It's more than just survivability, but it's also reproduction. It's one of those good words, right? Now, artificial selection. It's still selection, but it's artificial. Anytime you see that word, it's human caused. Whereas in this case, nature acts on the phenotypes. In this case, we do. We don't want wolves because wolves eat people. So we'd rather have Useless things like Dachshunds, right? So we choose those phenotypes. No one is going to choose, or nature is not going to choose Dachshund. Dachshund doesn't live in nature. Wolf does, right? Bulldog doesn't either. Collie, not really fit for nature. But we do because we have houses and couches and dog food bowls and that sort of thing, right? So artificial selection is where we are choosing the phenotype, but it's still acting on phenotype. Still the same concept, except for it's artificial, meaning we have chose it versus nature. Convergent evolution, big idea here, was kind of stuck in with the artificial selection. I don't know why, but what is convergent evolution? So think of things converging, right? Coming together. What is indeed coming together here? It's not two animals becoming one animal. Rather, it's a bunch of animals having the same kind of traits, converging on a set of similar traits. Why would they do that? Well, because they have a similar environment. All of these animals are good at water. Why are they good at water? Well, they can all swim. Various adaptations to allow them to do that. Now, these animals do not have common ancestry. The platypus and the dolphin are probably the closest related things there because they're both mammals. Platypus is a mammal, just nominally, but the dolphin is, obviously a mammal. Ducks are birds and sharks are fish, but yet they all are adapted well to the water because of this idea of convergent evolution. We'll talk about divergent evolution later. Love this picture. Love describing this concept this way. Because if you look at these two people, and this was an actual contest, there's nothing random here. Even though the guy in the background looks like he's intently following the progress of this particular contest, there's nothing that's really surprising about what's going to go on here. If this was an actual contest, there would be no random outcome. The guy on the left would win every time, right? Just like nature, the fittest survives. The one that is strongest, the one that is most adept or adapted to the environment, is going to survive. However, when the whistle blows, could something random occur in order to change the outcome of this contest? Sure. Big guy could have a heart attack. A lot of things could happen, right? That is a random occurrence. Natural selection is not random. The big guy wins every time. However, random does happen in order to change populations. So we're going to look at a couple random. First thing is mutations. Mutations are obviously random. Mutations are neither good nor bad. Don't use that language when describing mutations. Rather, use the words beneficial, detrimental. Mutations can cause decrease in fitness, is another way of saying detrimental, if you don't like that word. And so, again, a mutation is not good or bad. These are words that kind of have morality associated with them. Rather, we are going to talk about mutations as whether or not they increase or decrease fitness. Right, and so a mutation can be something that's just a singular organism is affected by it. It could be a mutation that is on a gamete, which would affect the offspring. It could also be passed down to future generations if that particular mutation is selected for. There's a lot of examples of this. In fact, all change is ultimately driven by mutations. Genetic drift. Genetic drift is random changes to small populations. Two things necessary for genetic drift: random and small populations. This is a large population of bugs. Two of them getting stepped on doesn't make a big deal, right? There's the eternal conflict between green bugs and brown bugs. They're evenly matched. Someone comes by, steps on two green bugs, couldn't have known that he would have shaken up the bug kingdom the way that he did, but that's what happened with his T-Rex socks on. And matching socks and shoes, by the way, not something that I do every day. But all of a sudden, the shift of power has disrupted from brown bugs, or from an even shift to brown bugs being dominant, all because of a big foot that decided to walk through this small kingdom and destroy it. It's random. Small population caused a big change. Two examples of genetic drift we can talk about. One of them is called bottlenecking, which I guess would kind of be what we were looking at here, right? Bottleneck is the idea that you have some beads in a bottle and you pour them out. Not all the beads are going to come out. They're going to get stuck near the bottleneck, right? You have a big or a small population that suffers some kind of effect, natural, some sort of disaster, maybe a big foot stepping on them, something, T-Rex socks, something like that is going to decrease the size of this population drastically in a random way, right? Volcano, it doesn't matter if you're the biggest, baddest deer on the planet. You're going to melt in the lava, right? And so that is going to change the allele frequency of that population dramatically, just because, right? It's random. There's seemingly no rhyme or reason to it. Founder effect, very similar. So you have this parent population of butterflies, and they're all happy, and butterflies decide to move away, and there's just a random sampling that moves away, right? The butterflies aren't thinking, well, we need an even number of gray and orange in order to make this population work. They don't. They just move, start a new population. They take a whole new gene pool with them, right? So this would be a random change to a small population. Genetic drift, good. Moving on, another random change is gene flow. Different from founder effect, because founder effect is a small group of a parent population is moving away, starting a new population. Gene flow is genes are moving from one population to another population, right? You have the white moth moving into the pink moth. The allele frequencies are completely changed now. And if white is dominant over pink, then this is going to be a big deal, right? And so you can see that kind of working out. Gene flow, seemingly random as well. Butterflies weren't deciding to change the world. It just happens. Everybody needs a hero. All right, so Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. There's two equations associated with Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. I'm not going to go over the equation in detail or how to work the problems in detail. I do have a video that you can check out. I'll go ahead and post a card up here so that you can look at that. That where I go over two sets of problems, actually two separate videos you can look at. But real simple concepts here. So this Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is the concept that if a population is at equilibrium, it's going to exhibit one of 5 traits. Let's see if I can get these off the top of my head. First, large population, no mutations, no natural selection, no gene flow, and random mating. Got them all. Random mating is the one that kind of gives people some weirdness. It's the idea that there's no reason to choose one mate over another, right? One mate's traits don't make them better or worse than another mate. It's all. And so if a population is at Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, if it meets all 5 of these traits, then that population is not evolving, right? Or the allele frequencies of that population will not change over time. There's a way to track that. These two scientists came up with these 2 equations in order to track those things, whereas P plus Q is equal to the allele frequency in a population, P being the dominant allele, Q being the recessive allele. I did note a change on the formula sheet this year, where it just says P is allele 1 and Q is allele 2. My guess is that they're buttering you up for some like incomplete dominance or something like that. It doesn't really matter, honestly. If it was me, I would stick with the dominant recessive thing that I've always learned, that you've probably learned, that your teachers have probably learned. But just note that the formula sheet is going to have some differences on it this year, right? And so that's a big deal. And if you add the big A's, the percentage of big A's in the population, percentage of little A's in the population, that's going to be 1, right? Now, the other equation, which I would call the genotype or genotypic equation, is P squared plus 2PQ equals Q squared equals 1. Now, those 2 equations are given, and what they are is given. One part is not given, and that is what is underneath the genotype frequency on the right side. You are not told that P squared equals the frequency of homozygous dominant. You're not given that information on the formula sheet. You are not told that 2PQ equals the percentage of heterozygous individuals in the population, and you are not told that Q squared equals the percentage of homozygous recessive individuals in the population. So make sure that you have that idea. You can derive that, right? If P plus Q equals 1, then P times P, or A times A, is big A, big A. That's going to be P squared. Same for little a, little a. 2PQ is just PQ is big A, little a. And of course, you need to do it the other way, little a, big A. And so that's where you get 2PQ, right? Encourage you, again, watch those videos where I go over those problems. Not a hard concept. Moving on, evidence for evolution. You've had this since probably whatever grade. Fossils show evidence. You can see fossil lineages, comparative anatomy. You get the old vertebrate forearm trick. Right, not trick. It's just a picture. I've seen this picture hundreds of times. Embryology is another one that shows this. Basically, any kind of way that homologous structures are going to be shown. Homologous structures are structures that show common ancestry. Why do they show common ancestry? Because they're similar structures. You see the bird arm and the whale fin there, maybe a seal fin, something like that. You see the homologous structures there. They show common ancestry. If you saw like a human hand, obviously it's going to look a lot closer because seals and humans are more closely related than seals and birds are. Embryos are going to show homologous structures as well, which we don't get into the embryo parts or anything in this class. There's several evidences for evolution. We're not going deep into this because, you know what, it's honestly not that deep of a subject. Moving on to common ancestry. So big ideas here is that you're going to be shown pictures like this, right? And one of the things that my students will oftentimes get confused on is this is a cladogram. You have species A, B, C. They're represented at the top. And I explained to them that time is kind of going out, where the oldest thing represents the furthest back point on this particular graph. So way back here is like old, right? And so the common ancestor between A and C is here, also B, right? Also B is here. And so there's an organism that lives here too. Even though we have species A, B, C, there's more than 3 species represented on here. This is a whole timeline, right? But a lot of times when you see this sort of graph, you're going to be using particular traits, and you may see like a trait down here like, I don't know, like skin or something. Skin's a bad one. Scales or endoskeleton or something like that, right? It's going to be some sort of trait that they have in common, or it could just be trait A, trait B, which is more of an AP way of doing things. Pretty ambiguous. So you may be asked, like, which one is more closely related, B and C or B and A, right? B and C are more closely related. So that's because there's just less fuss to get there. And so that's kind of the way I think about it. Cladograms, common ancestry. Moving on. Continuing evolution. This is the idea that evolution is a continuing process. Pretty simple section. I like to use these moths, a peppered moth, which was a white moth that grew on white trees, which makes sense. White moths on white trees don't get seen. What happens when those trees turn black? Because of the Industrial Revolution. The white moths are going to get eaten. The black moths, which exist because of mutation, are going to increase in fitness and going to continue to spread their genes to the next generation until we start cleaning up our factories, realizing we're doing a lot of damage to the ecosystem, and we start scrubbing our trees, making them white again. Black moths are going to be less fit than the white moths at that point. And so this is constantly happening, right? This would represent a directional shift, or what we would call directional selection, moving from one extreme to the other. We talked about stabilizing selection. We talked about disruptive selection, which was the opposite of stabilizing selection, selecting for the averages versus selecting for the extremes. You could also talk about the development of pathogens here. That was some of the CED talked about that, or the course description talked about the development of pathogens, like how antibiotics can cause bacteria to constantly be changing, or how viruses mutate as they move from one host to the next. There's a lot of examples of this. A lot of times that you're going to get that information in the prompt. And so there's not going to be a whole lot of new information here. Just understand the concept that evolution is a nonstop thing. It's good. Phylogeny, it's evolutionary history. 2 ways to represent this. At the top, you have a phylogenetic tree. At the bottom, you have a cladogram. We're not really dealing with a lot of the terminology associated with these diagrams, like clades and that kind of thing. Not important. And so the circles there, you can see are kind of, I appreciate this picture because it puts them side by side. When I talk about these, I always make sure to understand that a cladogram is something that you can kind of choose, right? Meaning what I mean by that, you can choose the parameters. And so I've chosen a set of traits of like derivative kind of, or what are they called? Not derivative traits. Anyway, can't think of that word right now. But there's a trait, right, like between species A and species B, and that's where it splits off. And then species D doesn't have that because it came about at that red circle, right? This is going to be what cladograms are best for, as opposed to a phylogenetic tree. Phylogenetic tree is going to show time, and so the length of those lines actually matter. Phylogenetic tree is typically based more in historical fact or evidence-based, whereas a cladogram can be something you can just kind of choose to make based on what you know about organisms, and you can choose a particular set of derived characteristics. There's the word, derived characters. Knew it would come to my head. You can choose that, and so I've seen both on the exams for sure. Students have had to like not correct one, but choose the best one, or create a cladogram even, like with whales or something, or bears. It was bears, I think. whales or bears. They're both amazing. So yeah, and like A and B, they're at the top of that cladogram can be switched around, right? There's some, and C and D could be switched around either way. It wouldn't matter. The length of those lines are going to matter more on a phylogenetic tree, and so this particular one doesn't show that as much. But you could have the line between the red circle and species A and B be shorter than that of C and D, just showing you that they're more recently split off as opposed to C and D. There's a lot of things you could do with that. Next, speciation. Speciation is the creation of new species, typically happens because of reproductive barriers. These barriers can be post-zygotic or pre-zygotic. Pre-zygotic means this barriers happen before the zygote. Several, right? Habitat, temporal, behavioral, any sort of thing that's going to keep them from mating. Mechanistic isolation. Literally the parts don't fit. They may be interested in one another, just not able to reproduce. You have like chemical pre-zygotic barriers, meaning the sperm and the egg don't talk to one another. There's several things that can happen to prevent the production of a zygote. There's also several things that can happen after the zygote has been produced. Hybrid inviability, where the hybrid is just dies. Hybrid sterility, where the hybrid is born but is sterile. There's another one where the hybrids can be born for several generations but not last. Forget the name of that. Any of those, though, are going to isolate to where two groups can no longer be one group, right? They've been isolated for a time period. That allopatric speciation, where they're geographically isolated, or sympatric speciation, where there's some other sort of isolation that's occurring that is keeping them from reproducing and creating one species. So they become two. This happens really quickly, usually all at once. Punctuated equilibrium is the current model that has largely accepted. Gradualism is kind of the idea that these changes take place slowly over long periods of time. That has largely been disproven, is not the right word, largely been rejected by the scientific community in light of evidence that suggests that punctuated equilibrium is more of the model that we can trust, because you have these long periods of stasis, these long straight lines, and followed by quick periods of rapid change. Why does this happen? Usually because of some sort of extinction level event that causes all these creatures to have to adapt very quickly or die. And this adaptation is oftentimes called adaptive radiation or divergent evolution. I don't believe the words adaptive radiation are actually used in our course description. I think divergent evolution is used, but I like adaptive radiation better because you have adaptive, we understand that concept, organisms adapt or change, right? And those changes can make an organism more or less fit. Radiation coming out from a single point. And so here you have all of these birds, right? They all came from a single ancestral bird. And so they're all linked ancestrally to that single bird, but because of different selection pressures or different available niches on an island or wherever they are, they've adapted, right? And so coming out from one single area. The finches, this picture is going to be really popular. Another example is like after reptile extinction, mammals had a kind of adaptive radiation. Anytime you start with one and go to many, adaptive radiation or divergent evolution is the word that's going to be used. There's extinction. There's our T-Rex screaming at the meteor. They don't really know what that is. I picked a different picture this time. Just search extinction, and if you want it, you can put dinosaurs, and it's going to make it better. And you'll see T-Rex screaming at a meteor, and the big cow dinosaur is just kind of looking like, what? What's that? And then the T-Rex knows, and he screams. Understand. So this particular extinction event, fitness is not going to be a thing, right? It's going to be, it doesn't matter how fit you are, you're not going to catch a meteor. That T-Rex is about to die. But extinction can happen for lots of other reasons, right? Loss of habitat, genetic isolation. There's lots of things that can happen that can cause extinction. Humans are a big cause of extinction. And so just understand that extinction happens not just because of asteroids. As when we think about extinction, this is what we're thinking about. But there's a lot of things that can cause a species to not be able to change rapidly enough in order to adapt. There are some species that have adapted really well to humans, but there are some that have not, right? And those species go extinct. And speaking of that, there's an extinct species, right? So variation exists in populations. Again, this is kind of a catch-all Hope you caught up sort of section of the course description. One of the things that I drew away from this is this idea of deleterious genes. And so a deleterious has the word delete in it, and so think of the delete, just not allowing them to live. A deleterious gene is going to be a gene that causes them to lose their fitness. At one point, this mammoth was super fit for its environment, but when the environment warmed up, those genes that made it fit now made it bad, right? Bad, there's that moral word again. Made it unable to survive, and so those genes become deleterious. And so variation in a population decreases this, the chance of this happening where there's no variation. If all the genes are deleterious, then that population will go extinct. And lastly, origins of the earth. Big takeaways here. The big takeaways are that the general or prevailing idea is that organic molecules came from inorganic molecules in the atmosphere. They were able to combine together, and through a series of processes could have made the first cells, right? And those cells, of course, that were made had to be able to replicate themselves. And so the production of the organic molecule RNA is supposed to be the first organic molecule, that one of the first organic molecules, along with amino acids, probably, and proteins that would have been around, and because RNA is able to replicate itself, and RNA can serve as enzymes of some of those reactions. And so this concept of RNA world, that RNA was the first of those molecules to come around, DNA would have come last or next because it's more stable, more complex. And so origins of the earth, not a whole lot here. You don't have to know all the time periods and all that stuff. Any of that kind of stuff you're going to be given on the exam. Hopefully this was helpful. If it was, let me know. Let me know that you enjoyed this. Let me know it was helpful. Probably going to be doing a live stream coming up as we prepare for the exam. So please stay tuned for that. Give me a like, give me a subscription, and comment down below. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.